The Brothers Karamazov, Book 2, An Inappropriate Gathering. Chapter 1. They arrive at the monastery. The day was beautiful, warm and clear. It was the end of August. The meeting with the elder had been appointed for immediately after the late liturgy, about 11:30. Our monastery visitors did not, however, show up for the liturgy, but arrived just as it was all over. They drove up in 2 carriages. In the first, a jaunty barouche drawn by a pair of expensive horses, sat Fyodor Alexandrovich Miusev with a distant relative of his, a very young man, about 20 years old, Pyotr Fomich Kalganov. This young man was preparing to enter university, whereas Miusev, with whom he was for some reason meanwhile living, was tempting him to go abroad with him to Zurich or Jena to enter university and pursue his studies there. The young man was still undecided. He was pensive and as if distracted. He had a nice face, was strongly built and rather tall. His gaze sometimes acquired a strange fixity. Like all very distracted people, he would sometimes look directly at you, and for a long time without seeing you at all. He was a taciturn and somewhat awkward, but occasionally, only by the way when he was alone with someone, he would suddenly become terribly talkative, impulsive, giggly, laughing sometimes for no reason at all. But as quickly and suddenly as his animation was born, it would also quickly and suddenly die out. He was always well and even elegantly dressed. He already possessed some independent means and had expectations of much more. He was friendly with Alyosha. In a very ancient, rattling, but roomy hired carriage with a pair of old pinkish-grey horses that lagged far behind Miusev's carriage, Fyodor Pavlovich also drove up with his boy Ivan Fyodorovich. Dmitri Fyodorovich had been informed of the time and length of the visit the day before, but he was late. The visitors left their carriages at the guest house outside the walls and entered the gates of the monastery on foot. With the exception of Fyodor Pavlovich, none of the other 3 seemed ever to have seen any monastery before. As for Miusev, he probably had not even been to church for some 30 years. He looked around with a sort of curiosity that was not without a certain assumed nonchalance. But his observant mind was presented with nothing inside the monastery walls, except a church and some outbuildings, which were in any case quite ordinary. The last worshippers were leaving the church, taking off their hats and crossing themselves. Among the common people were a few from the higher society, 2 or 3 ladies, one very old general. They were all staying at the guest house. Beggars immediately surrounded our visitors, but no one gave them anything. Only Petrusha Kalganov took a 10-kopeck piece from his purse and, embarrassed for some reason, hastily shoved it at one woman, saying quickly, "To be shared equally." None of his companions said anything to him, so there was no point in his being embarrassed, which, when he noticed it, made him even more embarrassed. It was odd, however. They should in fact have been mad, perhaps even with some sort of honor. One of them had recently donated 1,000 rubles, and another was the richest landowner and, so to speak, the best educated man on whom everyone there somewhat depended as far as catching fish in the river was concerned, subject to what turn the trial might take. And yet none of the official persons came to meet them. Miusev gazed distractedly at the tombstones near the church, and was on the point of remarking that these tombs must have cost the relatives a pretty penny for the right to bury their dead in such a holy place, but he said nothing. Mere liberal irony was transforming itself in him almost into wrath. But devil take it, isn't there someone we can ask in all this muddle? Something must be done. We're wasting time, he said suddenly, speaking as it were to himself. Suddenly an elderly, balding gentleman in a loose summer coat and with sweet little eyes came up to them. Tipping his hat and speaking in a high lisp, he introduced himself as the Tula landowner Maximov. He entered at once into our wayfarer's difficulty. The elder Zosima lives in the Hermitage, shut up in the Hermitage, about 400 paces from the monastery through the woods. I myself know, sir, that it is through the woods, Fyodor Pavlovich replied. But we do not quite remember the way. It's a long time since we were here. Out the gate here and straight through the woods. Follow me. If I may, I myself, too am. This way. They went out the gate and through the woods. The landowner Maximov, a man about 60, was not so much walking, but more precisely almost running alongside, staring at them all with contorted, almost impossible curiosity. His eyes had a pop-eyed look. You see, we have come to this elder on a private matter, Musov remarked sternly. We have, so to speak, been granted an audience with this said person, and therefore, though we thank you for showing us the way, we cannot invite you to go in with us. I've been already un chevalier parfait, and the landowner loosed the snap of his fingers into the air. Who is a chevalier? Asked Musov. The elder, the splendid elder, the honor and glory of the monastery Zosima, such an elder. But his disjointed talk was cut short by a little monk in a caul, very pale and haggard, who overtook them. Fyodor Pavlovich and Musov stopped. The monk, with an extremely courteous, deep bow, announced, "The Father Superior humbly invites you, gentlemen, to dine with him after your visit to the Hermitage. In his room at 1 o'clock, not later. And you too." He turned to Maximov. "That I shall certainly do," cried Fyodor Pavlovich, terribly pleased at the invitation. "Certainly, and you know, we've all given our word to behave properly here. And you, Pyotr Alexandrovich, will you go?" "How could I not? Did I not come here precisely to observe all their customs? Only one thing bothers me, and that is being in your company, Fyodor Pavlovich. Yes, Dmitri Fyodorovich doesn't exist yet. And it would be excellent if he failed to come at all. Do you think I like it, all this mess, and in your company too? So we shall come to dinner. Thank the Father Superior." He turned to the little monk. "No, it is my duty now to conduct you to the elder," the monk replied. "In that case I shall go meanwhile to the Father Superior, straight to the Father Superior," chirped the landowner Maximov. "The Father Superior is busy at the moment, however, as you please," the monk said hesitantly. "A most obnoxious old fellow," Musov remarked aloud, as the landowner Maximov ran back to the monastery. "He looks like Vincent," Fyodor Pavlovich declared suddenly. "Is that all you can think of? Why should he look like Vincent? Have you ever seen Vincent?" "I've seen his photograph. It's not his features, but something ineffable. He's the speed and image of Vincent. I can always tell you just by the physiognomy." "Well, maybe so, you're an expert in such things, but see here, Fyodor Pavlovich, you yourself were just pleased to mention that we've given our word to behave properly, remember? I'm telling you, control yourself. If you start any buffoonery, I have no intention of being put on the same level with you here. You see what sort of man he is." He turned to the monk. "I am afraid to appear among decent people with him." A thin, silent smile, not without cunning of a sort, appeared on the pale, bloodless lips of the monk. But he made no reply, and it was all too clear that he remained silent from a sense of his own dignity. Miusov scowled even more. "Oh, the devil take the lot of them, it's just a front, cultivated for centuries, and underneath nothing but charlatanism and nonsense," flashed through his head. "Here's the Hermitage, we've arrived," cried Pyotr Pavlovitch. "The fence and gates are shut." And he started crossing himself energetically before the saints painted above and to the sides of the gates. "When in Rome, do as the Romans do," he remarked. "Here in the Hermitage there are altogether 25 saints saving their souls, looking at each other and eating cabbage. And not one woman ever goes through these gates. That's what's so remarkable, and it's really true. Only didn't I hear that the elder receives ladies?" He suddenly addressed the monk. "There are some peasants of the female sex here even now, over there, lying near the porch waiting. And for higher ladies 2 small rooms were built on the porch, but outside the wall. You can see the windows, and the elder comes to them by an inner passage when he feels well enough, so it is still outside the wall. Right now there is a lady, a landowner from Kharkov, Madame Hochlakov, waiting there with her paralyzed daughter. Probably he has promised to come out to them, although lately he has been so weak that he's hardly shown himself even to the common people. So after all, a little hall has been made from the Hermitage to the ladies. Not that I'm implying anything, Holy Father, I'm just, on the Mount Athos, have you heard? Not only are the visits of women not allowed, but no women at all, no female creatures of any kind, no hens, no hen turkeys, no heifers. Fyodor Pavlovitch, I shall turn back and leave you here, and without me they will throw you out. I forewarn you." "How I am bothering you, Pyotr Alexandrovitch, just look!" he cried suddenly, stepping inside the wall of the Hermitage. "What a vale of roses they live in." Indeed, though there were no roses, there were many rare and beautiful autumn flowers, wherever there was room for them. They were obviously tended by an experienced hand. There were flower beds within the church fences and between the graves. The little house where the elder had his cell, wooden, one-storied, with a front porch, was also surrounded with flowers. Was it like this in the time of the previous elder of Arsenofe? They say he didn't like such niceties. They say he used to jump up and beat even the ladies with a stick, Fyodor Pavlovitch remarked as he went up the steps. The elder Varsonov indeed sometimes seemed like a holy fool, but much of what is told about him is nonsense. And he never beat anyone with a stick, replied the little monk. Now, gentlemen, if you will wait a moment, I will announce you. Fyodor Pavlovitch, for the last time, I give you my conditions, do you hear? Behave yourself, or I will pay you back for it. Miusov had time to mutter once again. I don't see why you're so greatly agitated, Fyodor Pavlovitch said mockingly. Are you afraid of your little sins? They say he can tell what's on a man's mind by the look in his eyes. And anyway, do you value their opinion so highly? You, such a Parisian, such a progressive-minded gentleman. You even surprise me, you really do. But Miusov did not have time to reply to this sarcasm. They were invited to come in. He walked in, feeling somewhat irritated. That's it. I know what will happen. I'm irritated. I'll start arguing, lose my temper, demean myself and my ideas, flashed through his head.